Okay, everybody, welcome to our second webinar for the VMCE Study Hall from the Community Hub. Hopefully you got to the link from there. If not, maybe through social media. I know I posted it on Twitter, X, whichever you want to call it, and LinkedIn. Today, Chris Huss is going to talk to us about exam prep for the VMCE and how to best prepare and study for the VMCE to hopefully result in a success once you go to schedule your exam. So just really quick introductions, not much slides here from me, and then I'm just going to go ahead and give it over to Chris. First of all, I'm Shane Williford. I'm a systems architect based here in Kansas City, and I'm a Veeam legend. Been using Veeam for better part of, well, 13, 14 years, somewhere thereabout. And that's really about it. Chris, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
Well, sure. Yeah. Thanks, Shane. Chris Huss, Louisville, Kentucky, on the Eastern time zone here. And I've been into IT for about 25 years or so. And in between consulting work for customers in my area, I also like to teach my customers what I did to solve their problem and ended up becoming a Microsoft instructor for a local college here in Louisville for a few years, and then got into teaching VMware classes for about 20 years so far. And then a few years ago, started teaching Veeam classes back in 2017, and that's been a lot of fun. Travel around the country teaching all these classes, and a lot of them nowadays are online. So I teach from home, but a lot of fun. I like helping the students out. And I learn from the students as well. So every time I teach a class, I pick up something from them. They might share something from work. They might ask me a question I haven't been asked before. I go and research it, and then, I add that knowledge to the next class there. So I'm always trying to learn, always trying to share the knowledge and also learn from the students too. So this presentation that I'm about to give here, I gave it at VeeamON just a couple of weeks ago. We had about 30, 35 people in that session there. It was an all day session. So you're getting a 1 hour version of that here today. Um, so if we had 8 hours, I wish I could spend that with you, but I'm definitely going to give you the best of that, and then I could share these PowerPoint slides with you too, so you can take something home with you. But this presentation really comes from years of listening to students' feedback, the struggles that they've had trying to pass the exam over the years, and figuring out kind of where they went wrong and maybe why they didn't pass the exam the first time. And I thought, okay, I'm going to remember this and I'm going to take some notes. And then one day I got the opportunity to be able to present all of this wealth of knowledge at VeeamON here. So I want to share that with the community. So people
Awesome.
that went to VeeamON had to spend $600 plus travel expenses and all that. And you guys are getting a similar thing here, and you're able to do that from the comforts of your home. So
Mhm.
I'm excited about that.
All right. Well, just a real quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We just did introductions. As Chris is presenting, feel free to ask questions. Just go ahead and shoot them to me in the chat, and I'll try and answer them. And if I don't know the answer, we'll go ahead and ping Chris and get an answer for him. So he's going to go ahead and uh, give his session and present some information for us to help us in our preparing for our VMCE exams. And then at the end, if we have time, um, we'd really like to hear any feedback you have to make future webinars for the VMC Study Hall a bit better. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Chris,
All right.
and I'm going to stop sharing.
And then I'm going to start sharing.
And there you go.
All right. You're able to see that okay?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. All right. Well, my boss, who I was on the call with earlier before this session, she made my presentation much more nice looking. I know how to put words on a blank piece of paper and She knows how to make them look real nice and professional. So I have to give her credit for that. But anyway, what I'm hoping here in this session is to help you all become the best test taker that you can be. So it doesn't really matter what test you're trying to take. I want to teach you all how to look at the questions carefully, look at the answers carefully, and then try to figure out what the best answer is, right? And there's a reason why I use that word, the best answer, versus just the correct answer. So try to choose my words carefully here. There's a strategy to this, and we'll get started. So, how to bring your A game on test day? Whenever you decide to take an exam, how can you be your best on that day? A lot of times I've gotten feedback from the students, and they'll tell me, I ran out of time on the exam. That's why I failed. Or I got confused on the questions and I couldn't figure out what answer to choose and they failed. And I think that they failed a lot of times for the wrong reasons. So we're going to try to prevent you from doing that here. So, how to bring the A game, strategy to prepare for the exam, and then time management best practices and strategies, and then also analyzing the questions and answers properly. Anytime that I try to prepare for an exam, it doesn't matter if it's a Microsoft exam, if it's a VMware exam, a Veeam exam, what I typically want to do is research exactly what do they want me to know for this exam. I'm going to try to find the exam blueprint. That's the term that VMware used years ago for their VCP exams. So I want to look at the bullet point list of things, an outline of things like what knowledge are they testing me on? And once I try to figure that out, I'm going to try to research some of those topics. I'm going to look at the vendor's documentation on that. I'm going to set some things up in my lab and try to test some things out. And so I want to show you from specifically for this exam here what is available because sometimes students forget these things. What I've done here is I've created some links to where you'll be able to get to certain documentation. So when I was presenting this at Veeam On, I didn't give the students the PowerPoint slides beforehand, but I figured that they could use their phone and they could scan the QR code, and it's going to take them to these links. So whatever you want to do there, once you get access to these PowerPoint slides, you can just copy and paste this in your browser, or if you want to take a scan of this from your phone, it's going to take you to the same place here. And the first thing, if I'm researching about the exam, I want to know about the exam blueprint. I want to know the outline of things that I'm going to be tested on. So if you've ever sat a Veeam class before as a Veeam customer, then there's a place that you go to get all of your documentation, your courseware, the word that I'm looking for here. So if I take and copy this link, copy that, and let's put it in the browser. Veeam manages their courseware through a third-party company called Logical Operations. That's why you've seen Veeam.lo choice, logicaloperations.com. And if you've ever taken a Veeam course before from a Veeam instructor, then you would have gone here and you would have been emailed some 10-digit code. You would hit enroll. You would type in a username and password that you want to create. And then any other time you want to log into this website, you're going to log in with your username and password. So this is my personal email address, and I'm going to click OK here. And so whatever class that you've sat from a Veeam instructor before, it should show up here. I got like Veeam version 11 courses, Veeam version 12. That's what we're interested in today. And you can see like the participant notebook or the participant handout, the lab guide. There's that exam blueprint, that exam specifications guide here. Now, sometimes Veeam will update their courseware and they might make corrections. You might get an email that says you need to go to this page again. You could download the newest revision of the course. So, kind of look for that from time to time. Some other things that might be helpful too, whenever I'm preparing for an exam, I don't want to be taking the exam and that's the first time I've seen any kind of test questions on it. I want to take a practice exam. I want to test my knowledge before I put my $180 down on the line and take the real exam. So there is a practice exam here, practice test. There's about 48 questions here. Now the real exam has 60 questions, which is what they're mentioning here. We can talk all about that here in just a second. But the practice exam, the questions on here are pretty similar to what you're going to get on the real exam. And don't take my word for it here. I had a lady from one of my classes earlier this year. She just passed her exam. And I asked her the question. I said, "What do you think about the real test questions compared to the practice exam?" And she said, "I think they were extremely similar, and even a couple of them were identical." That's great. And I've heard that from several students recently that have passed. So that's why I think it's good to go over the practice exam. And what I ended up doing on this PowerPoint presentation is I retyped all of the test questions on these slides here, the question one. And I retyped all the answers all by hand. And then I got a link here on how to find your own answers. So that's how I prepare for an exam. When I look at some practice questions and I'm not sure exactly what the answers are, I'm going to try to find it in the vendor's documentation. So this is going to take you to the Veeam user guide. So you can either use this link here, you can scan this QR code with your phone, it's going to take you to the same place. I like to look up my own answers because when I do that, I'm going to read something in that manual that's going to teach me something I didn't know before or I didn't know well enough. All right. So I think it's a real learning opportunity. What I don't try to do is memorize questions and answers, even though Tiffany told us that the questions were very similar to the real exam. What we don't want to get in the habit of is just memorizing these things because on the real exam, they're going to change some things around a little bit. They might change some wording ever so slightly. They might change some wording on the answers or the questions. And now all of a sudden you've memorized something and you kind of skim over that question and you quickly answer it thinking it's the same thing you had on the practice exam, but it won't be. It won't be exactly the same. So what I don't want to do is, teach you how to memorize questions and answers. I want to teach you the concepts. So when you get a question similar to this, then you're going to know how to answer it no matter how V mixes it up on the real exam. Right. And the other thing is, we're not just preparing for an exam, we're trying to do our job better. We're trying to administer a Veeam environment better. So we're trying to have a deeper understanding of different features of Veeam. That's the other point of this, too. Hopefully, you're not just taking an exam just to check a box. You are wanting to gain some knowledge there. So I show you all how to find your own answers, and you're going to learn a lot more in that process. So the next thing here, a lot of times, not only do students forget, like, where do I get my courseware again? It's been 6 months since I sat the class. I only remember how to find my books or my electronic books. I showed you that link. The other thing is, I like to learn from other people's experience. There is certainly somebody out there in the world that has taken this exam before I have. And I bet they blogged about it. I bet they have some words to say about it. Well, luckily, Shane has set up a study hall. We're all here today because of that. And and not only does he have some practice questions that he posts every other day or so, and people respond with the answers, and we can learn from each other. Some people may post their own experience, like, I just took the exam, watch out for these things, make sure you study hard on this topic. So that's going to relieve a little bit of pressure knowing that other people have passed it and here's what they did to prepare. So I've done that with all the vendors, Microsoft, VMware, Veeam, Cisco over the years. I'm always trying to figure out somebody else did this. How did they do it? And then I'm going to try to follow in their footsteps or do it a little bit better. All right. So you've got the link to the Veeam communities here. The next thing, I'm trying to take excuses away for myself as to why I can't do something, or students. When they come up with an excuse, all right, okay, here's the solution for that. Now, I have my own lab environment, and I would be lost if I didn't get to practice things. Like, so here's my Veeam environment. I have a VMware environment. I have a Hyper-V environment. I've got vSAN. I've got some NFS storage. So I can play around with a lot of things. Well, when my students get out of class, they might not have their own home lab, and they were able to play around in Veeam's lab for a week. But now what do they do? How do they practice? So to take that excuse away from you, like I can't get hands-on or I can't play around at work, we do have Veeam hands-on labs. So if I click on this link here, copy that, and then we'll just paste this here.
While you're doing that, Chris, I just want to mention that there's also a hands-on lab thematic page or page, if you will, on the Community Hub where you can ask questions, uh, suggest new labs for the team to create, and they're pretty good at answering that. So just wanted to mention
Okay.
that as well.
Yeah. So there's a link off of the VMCE study hall.
No, it's its own hands-on labs page in the Community Hub. So if you're on the Community Hub and you go to the top of the page and select groups, that just means different pages, different theme pages like the VMCE pages, VUG pages. There's one for hackathon, but there's also one for hands-on lab there as well. You can just scroll down and see the hands-on labs there and then click on that and just subscribe to that area of the Community Hub.
All right. Well, if you happen to have a link to that, we could throw it in the chat window. But yeah, this one here is something off of Veeam's website, and you can see like if you wanted to request a lab, they're going to have you fill out your information. So Veeam tracks this. They want to see how effective this is. Does this end up turning into a sales opportunity for them down the road? They may follow up with you. Hey, how did your lab go? Do you have any questions? Can we help you out with anything? But when you request a lab, it'll take a few minutes to launch that lab, but you have access to it for about 4 hours. And there's some instructions if you want to follow the instructions, or you could just launch the lab. Once you're into this remote desktop, you can play around and do whatever you want. It will shut down after 4 hours, and it does cost Veeam money. Every time you launch this, they're paying a hosting company. They're called 1111 to host that lab. So that's why they don't stay up for more than 4 hours, just to save some money there. But yeah, you can play around with any of these here as often as you want. So now you don't have an excuse for not practicing Veeam in in a in a home lab environment or an isolated environment that's not production. Okay. Let's see, what's the next thing here? Veeam University. Sometimes students will tell me, man, after class, it was great, but it's been a few weeks, I've forgotten everything. And I need a refresher. Can I sit your class again? Right? Sometimes students will audit classes again if the schedules work out. Um, but you don't have to do that. How about the Veeam University? Also free. If we copy this, paste this in here. So there is a team at Veeam that is dedicated to creating this content. And here you see what says free on-demand training. So that means that at your own time, you don't have to sit a class with me and have to be in class at a certain time and interrupt your workday. You can watch these videos anytime that you want and as much as you want here. So there's all kinds of videos. And the thing about it is, a lot of these videos are demonstrating things that we do in class. I bet there's a demo for every lab that we do, or a lot of the instructions that we go over in the PowerPoint slides. So sometimes if I'm studying for an exam and I don't have it set up in my lab environment and I can't play around with it, I may watch a YouTube video on that topic, or I may find the vendor has a video instruction set like Veeam does here, and I can watch a quick video. And it actually helped me pass the VMware VCAP exam years ago, the Advanced Professional Exam. There was the topic that I didn't have set up in my labs. I'm like, let's watch that video real quick. And when I sat the exam, I was able to remember what I watched in that video. So sometimes you don't have to have a whole lab set up. You can watch a few concepts here and get an understanding, at least enough to pass the exam. And then if you have to go and perform this at work, well, you can do a deeper dive on that later. So definitely take advantage of some of these videos that they've got here. Um, it's worth checking out, doesn't cost any money. Right? Sometimes the students will ask questions like, how do I sign up for the exam? And so if we go to this page here, it's Veeam's website. I think I go like under support and then courses and certifications. But what I would have to do is sign in with my Veeam account. And if I didn't have a Veeam account, I would have to create one. It's free. But usually I would sign in with the account that I used when I signed up for class, same email address. Once I log in, it's going to show that I've attended the class. So what happens if you sit one of my classes, I take attendance, and at the end of the week, I turn that in to a person at Veeam. And then they take up to a week, usually, sometimes quicker than that, but they're going to update your profile, and you're going to see this little circle turn green. Well, now the next thing that you could do is you could schedule the exam. So there'll be a button here to schedule the exam. And you can either take the exam from your house if you've got a room that's pretty sanitary where there's not a lot of documentation on the walls or posters on the walls, there's not a lot of noise or anything like that, you could take it at home if you need to, or you can go to a test center. I usually go to a test center. Now after you pass the exam, you're going to be able to come back here and you'll see where this circle is got a green inside of it there, and you'll be able to download your certificate, and you can get your Credly badge, and you can link that to your LinkedIn profile and show the world that you've passed, and verify all that. So that's what we would do there. And there's some frequently asked questions here too. Sometimes students want to know, like, do I have to sit a class, or how long is my certification good for? Do I have to renew it every year? How much does it cost? All that kind of stuff. So we have frequently asked questions page here as well. Check that out. All right. What else we got here? All right. As far as the anatomy of the exam, let's talk about the number of questions because I like to strategize this here. If I know how many questions are on the exam and if I know what the passing score is, I can game it a little bit. It'll give me an idea of like how many can I miss and still be okay. Right? I don't need to have a perfect score. I just need a passing score. So, I'm going to gain a little bit more confidence going in knowing how many I can approximately miss there. The competencies, what do they expect me to know on the exam? What if I don't pass the first time? How long do I have to wait before I could take it again? And what's the strategy behind that too? Right, I've got some good ideas on that. How do you obtain your certificate credit badge? We talked about that a second ago. And then what if you're trying to sign up for the exam and you don't see the little green circle lit up there, and you're like, hey, I know I took the class. They're just not giving me credit for it right now. Who do we talk to? Um, so we'll talk about that because that happens more often than not. So, all right. We talked about going over to the Logical Operations website, the exam specifications guide. We could click on that. Let's see here. Back up. Specifications guide. Nice little PDF here. Right. So it says there's 60 multiple choice items, questions. 50 of them are scored, 10 of them are not scored. What does that mean? Well, Veeam hired a company called Alpine to help them redo the certification exam because in the past, it has been more difficult than it should be and confusing more than it should be. So Veeam hired a professional company that does certifications for a living called Alpine. They helped out VMware, and they helped out Nutanix and other companies. So Veeam wanted to be up to that same standard there, paid a lot of money for it. And what they decided is that we're going to come up with a pool of questions. Maybe there's 250 questions in the pool, and students are going to get 60 of them. And if the students all miss the same questions, then we're going to throw some of those questions out and we're going to draw from the pool and put some new questions in there. Or if Veeam feels that some of the test questions have been compromised on some brain dump sites, they can take those questions out and draw from the pool and put some new questions in there. So you do want to answer all 60 questions, but 10 of them you're not counting towards your score. All right. Now it says here the scoring scale is 300 to 900. I think you get 300 points just for showing up, signing your name on the piece of paper and sitting down in the chair. So you need to come up with a score of 720 here. So about 420 more points, I guess, if I can do the math properly on that. So it used to be you needed like a 70% to pass. And that was easy math. I could go, okay, 60 questions, 70% of that, that's, I don't know, 35, 40 questions, that I have to get right. And maybe 15 to 20 I could get wrong and still be okay. But, if we use that 720 number roughly, let me do a little calculator here. And this isn't going to be exact, but let's take 60 and then times 0.72, right, equals 43. So if I'm anywhere close to being right, out of 60 questions, we need to get about 43 correct. Well, what does that leave us with? 17 that we might be able to miss, right? Knowing that 10 of them don't count against your score there doesn't help you, doesn't hurt you. Right? When I think about things like that, when I know that I can miss a certain amount, then when I'm answering the questions on the exam, I can mark the ones that I'm not sure about. And if I've marked fewer than 15, 17 of them, I'm probably going to pass the exam. So that's going to relieve a little pressure off me. So I can go back to the ones I marked at the end of the exam and try to answer as best as I can, put something down there, change an answer if I don't feel like the one I put down was correct the first time, right? Maybe try to get a few extra points just in case. But that's kind of a strategy that I employ there when I go to prepare for an exam. It's like, how many can I miss approximately? So then, I can gauge how I'm doing on the exam based on how many I've marked and I'm not sure about. All right. You get 75 minutes to answer those 60 questions. So when I took the exam over the years, I would do about a minute per question. Now, some questions may take me 5 minutes to answer. Some questions might take me a few seconds, but on average, I could answer 60 questions in 60 minutes. And so that leaves me with 15 minutes left to go over those questions that I marked that I wasn't sure about. I didn't feel good about them. So I use every minute on the exam. I'm not in a rush to end the exam, right? I go through all the questions. I go through all the ones that I wasn't sure about. I go over everything as many times as I can. And then when I've only got a few seconds left, I hit submit and end it. And then I wait to see if I've passed or failed, right? So definitely don't get in a hurry on that there. If you don't get the score that you want the first time that you take the exam, well, then how long should you wait before you try to take it again? My strategy is like this. If think about a person that prepares for the Olympics. They've been training all year. They're going to the Olympics. They're in the best condition that they can be mentally and physically. And now they're at the Olympics and they're attempting some record, some world record there. And they don't get it on their first attempt. Well, then do they go home and wait a few months and then try their attempt again? They won't be in the same physical and mental condition. And that's what I noticed that students make a real mistake here. They're missing a real opportunity You've mentally prepared yourself. You filled your head with a lot of facts. You didn't get the score that you wanted this time. Well, then you immediately go back home, look up the answers to the questions you weren't sure about. If you can remember as many questions as possible, go back home, find those answers, go take the exam within a few days after that, and you will pass. Out of the 20 plus exams, maybe 25, 30 exams I've taken over my career, I've never failed an exam more than twice. Like I might have failed it once and then I studied hard for a couple of days. I went and passed it the second time. But I don't need to keep learning the same thing over and over again. Like, oh, I failed it again because I missed these same questions again. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not going to miss the same questions twice. So if I can get a few more questions right on my second attempt, I'm going to pass that exam. Some students miss the exam by a couple of questions. So if they'll study real hard for a couple more days, they can go back on their second attempt and they can pass it. If you don't pass the first time, you only have to wait 24 hours. You can go take it again. You just have to pay your money again. Right now, if you don't pass it the second time, you have to wait 2 weeks, and after that, you're waiting more and more. I've had some people that they'll fail, and then they will wait months, and they're like, "Chris, can you help me prepare again?" Like we're starting over again is what we're doing, right? Just think about people that are preparing for the Olympics and the condition that they get in, right? You don't want to lose that momentum. Okay.
Chris, let me add something there that you had mentioned about the exam. You go through the exam, you finish, you wait for the results. Something that changed with the version 12 exam, I just want people to be aware of. If you have taken exams before, more of the, I say the lower level, like engineer exam, like Beams or the BCP from VMware. Normally, or what you may be used to, is as soon as you click finish, 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 finish multiple times because the testing engine wants to make sure you are completely done. Within a few seconds, you normally get your results back and you know if you pass or fail. With Veeam's exam, when they updated it, you won't get notified right away. It doesn't take long, but you won't see it on screen. You log out of the testing engine, and then you'll get an email saying your score report is available for you to view. So it took me about 5 minutes to get my score report. I just want people to know it freaked me out, is what I'm getting at. Like, oh my gosh, did I something wrong in Pearson or whatever? And no, you didn't do anything wrong. It's taken a few extra minutes to get that score, get your exam scored. So I just wanted people to understand that when they go to take the exam.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't experienced that before, but since I helped write the test questions on the exam this time, well, then they didn't make me take the exam because they're like, you've already seen the test questions. There's no point in you taking the exam again. So I didn't know of the new changes that took place there. So, okay. All right. The reason why I volunteered to help with the panel of judges that wrote the test questions is because I was mad like everybody else. I'm like, these questions aren't clear enough. These answers aren't clear enough. We're going to fix that. And while I didn't see every test question in the pool, I probably saw half of them. And the ones that I did see, I tried to make sure they were written much better than before. Same thing with the answers. And if I didn't like the question, I rejected it, and the author of that question would have to rewrite it, or it just wasn't in the pool anymore. So things are, on the exam are much better than what they've been in the past. Or being an instructor and wanting to help students out, I wanted to make sure that the answers and the questions were much better, much clearer than before. Uh, as far as a lot of times people want to know, like, where should I focus my studies at? Well, think about the majority of the questions that you're going to get. 27% of the questions, that's almost 30%. You might get 15, 20 questions on things like RPOs and RTOs. You have to know about different Veeam components. What does a mount server do? Where do you configure a mount server? What about WAN accelerator? What about the guest interaction proxy? You got to know all about these different Veeam components and then how they apply in a certain scenario on the exam. Okay. I'll tell you more about the test questions too, but you can see different percentages in these different sections here. You'll get some questions on scale out repositories here as well. Guest interaction proxies one. NAS backups, certainly. There's a few questions on Enterprise Manager, Veeam 1. So even though they didn't have Veeam 1 in the course, until recently, they've added it back in if you sit the 12.1 version of the VMCE course now. But yeah, we've got a few questions on the exam, a couple of them on Veeam 1. A lot of the questions you're going to get based around jobs, whether you're doing a backup job, backup copy job, replication, also doing restorations, recoveries. You'll get some test questions on that as well. All right. A lot of times on the questions, they will say like the administrator needs to restore something from a backup file, and they're concerned about downtime or data loss. What is going to offer the fastest RTO here or the best RPO? They're going to use terms like that, and you have to be careful on the exam not to get confused as to what those terms mean. Recovery point objective. How often should I run my job so I have the least amount of data loss? Recovery time objectives. There's different ways that we can restore your data. Some ways are faster than others. So you have to answer those questions accordingly. So all I did was kind of re-summarize on these slides the exam blueprint. Frequently asked questions, don't forget about those pages there. Don't forget about the practice exam. And in reality, when you get a copy of these slides, I basically took the questions from the practice exam and just put them on the slides. And then I just make you look up the answers yourself. But I give you links to it. So some strategies here, since we got about 20 minutes left. The hardest thing I think for students is to sign up for the exam. And you're trying to figure out like when is the best time that I can take the exam? Is it around a holiday when work is not so busy? Or maybe you work for a school corporation. Should I do it during summer break when there's no students or teachers around? What if you work for a hospital and you're on call nights and weekends? When is a good time for you to sign up for an exam? Because you're going to have to study too and find that time. That is the toughest thing is figuring out what's a good day for me to do this thing. Um, Once you pick that date, then you're going to want to work towards that. You're going to want to study a little bit every day. You don't want to be overwhelmed at the very end and you're like, oh gosh, I have to spend an entire week studying here because I've not done any studying for the past 2 or 3 months. I've been so busy. Take a few minutes here or there and study a certain topic that maybe you're not familiar with as much. Maybe you don't use all the Veeam features at work. So, maybe a couple of months out, you're going to put time on your calendar every day to study a little bit here and there. Now, you're just a few days before you're going to take the exam. I usually cram over a weekend. So my strategy is I'm going to take exams on a Monday. Why? Because I've crammed over the weekend. I've filled my head with so much Veeam knowledge, I'm going to forget it real quickly if I'm not careful. So while it's still swirling in my head, then I'm going to take it on Monday first thing because I'm not distracted by work and I'm not tired from working all week either. So I usually take it early in the morning, but I go ahead and eat breakfast. I don't want my stomach growling because that's one more thing nagging at me. It's distracting me, but I'm not going to take it after lunch because I've eaten too much food. I'm going to be tired. I'm not going to be as alert. So you want to make sure you set up your mind and body the best possible way that you can. So, again, I'm going to take it on a Monday because I've crammed all weekend. I'm going to take it after breakfast because I've got a little food in my stomach. I'm not hungry now. And and then at that point, I'm going to arrive at the test center early. You don't want to arrive late because you're going to lose your money. They're not going to let you take the exam if you're late. I like to get there early because the more that I sit there and think about it, the more anxiety builds up in my body, and I start to get nervous, and I start to forget things, and I start to second guess myself and question myself, and all these things I just start to forget. I can't recall them. So I want to get it over with as quickly as I can. I go to the test center early. They might let me start taking it early, which is nice. But also, I go to the test center early because what if I haven't been there in a few months and they change the building where I'm supposed to take the exam? Well, if I got there on time, I would be late because I'm now having to walk around and figure out where'd they move the test center at. You don't want to run into that. The other thing is, usually what I'll do is I'll go to the test center the day before and make sure I know exactly where I'm supposed to go. Let's get rid of that anxiety. We don't need to be thinking about that. All right. What I don't do is sit out in the car and while I'm just doing some last second cramming, I don't drink a whole bottle of water. And I've had some students say that they drank a whole soft drink before they sat the exam and they had to go to the bathroom. They had to think about going to the bathroom the whole time. That's going to be tugging at your mind. Like if you're sitting there and like you're fidgeting, you don't need that, right? So drink a little bit of water. Don't overdo it. Be careful about that. And then here's another thing. I've had students and instructors, right? These are like peers to me, and they're like, I am horrible at taking the exam. I am no good at test taking. You believe what you tell yourself, right? So it's amazing what the mind will believe, and all you have to do is say it. Um, there's some instructors I know that are really good at teaching Veeam, and they can tell you everything about Veeam, but they will fail the exam because they already have it in their head that they're going to fail. I mean, who does that? You think people that go to the Olympics, when they first stand up to the line and they're getting ready to race somebody, they're like, man, I am horrible at running. I'm going to lose. They don't think that way, and you shouldn't think that way. You have to say nice things about yourself, at least for a couple of hours, and then go pass the exam, and then you can talk bad about yourself if you want to. But hopefully you won't, because you said nice things and nice things happened, right? We want to start saying nice things about ourselves. Get in the habit of that. Clear your head. You got one job right now. I watched a documentary called Pumping Iron years ago, and Arnold, he's actually in this picture right here. He was trying to prepare for Mr. Olympia, and he won it like 7 times, 6 or 7 times over his career. And when they interviewed him, all he cared about was winning Mr. Olympia. He goes, if somebody's breaking into my car outside of the gym, I don't care about that right now. I'll deal with that later. I'm focusing on my workout right now. That's all that matters. And you see how he is successful today because he can focus on what he needs to do right now and he'll worry about the other things later on. You can't think about, I got to get back home and take care of things around the house, or I've got a meeting to go to right after this. You want to pick a test day where you can 100% focus on getting that one job done. After you pass, okay, you can worry about those other things, but you can't have those on your mind while you're trying to recall some facts about Veeam. All right, think about that. All right, here's another thing I learned from another instructor. Whenever I'm getting ready to do something, it's it's the buildup until I finally get to do that thing I'm trying to do. It's the anxiety that gets to me because I'm like, oh, I've got to lift really heavy today, and I've never lifted this weight before, and if I start to talk negative about myself, then I'm going to not lift the weight that I want to lift, right? And you can apply that to anything that you're trying to do that maybe you don't do all the time, maybe you've never done. So, what I do to help me when I get nervous and I get this anxiety that builds up and my heart rate starts raising, I breathe, right? Just keep breathing. Hold on a second. All right. You don't know the answer to this question. Pause for a minute, relax, it's okay, right? Because if you hold your breath, you're not going to be able to think straight, right? Some people may be martial artists in the audience. Some of you all do martial arts. What does your instructor tell you? Keep breathing, keep moving. As soon as you stop breathing, you freeze up, you're going to get hit. Well, it's the same thing on the exam. If you stop breathing, you can't think right. So calm down. It'll be okay, right? You're going to get past this question. If you don't know it, mark it, save it for later. You're going to get an easier question. Probably the next one will be easier than this one. All right, so just keep breathing. Here's the other thing. I don't take the exams by myself. Now, I can't bring anybody into the test center with me. Can't have anybody in the room with me physically, but mentally I can. Nobody knows that. You know, the testing people that are watching me on the camera, they don't know the people that are helping me in my head. All right. But when I get to a question that I don't know, I think about my study partners. What were we studying? What did we talk about? What do they think about this question? And I try to trick my mind into thinking they're going to give me the answer. If I think that I'm doing something with my friends, I don't get as nervous. I don't think that I'm by myself and I'm the only one here, right? So sometimes you just have to trick yourself into being successful. So I do mentally bring my friends and family with me, all right? And if you watch this video on the slide, you'll see Eddie Hall. He's setting a world record at the time, deadlifting 1,100 pounds. And Arnold is sitting there cheering him on. And all this audience there in Columbus, Ohio at the Arnold classes, they're cheering him on. And that gives him more energy and he got more adrenaline going and he lifts it, you know. But he's drawing strength from the audience, from his friends there that want him to do that. So pretend like you got a fan club with you and they're cheering you on, right? And they know that you're a great person and you're going to be successful. It will do wonders for you, trust me. Here's the other thing. When I think that I have 60 questions to get through, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't sit here that long. I mean, I barely can sit still for 5 minutes. How am I going to get through 60 questions? I don't think of it that way anymore. I think of, I only have 10 questions to do right now. Let's just get to those first 10. And pretty soon, maybe 10, 15 minutes later, I'm done with those first 10. All right, all you got to do is 10 more questions. And I do 10 more. And pretty soon, I've tricked myself into answering those 60 questions. And an hour has gone by. So when you have something that seems overwhelming, break it up into little chunks there. Just trick yourself into being successful like that. Right? It's no different than if you, I don't know, work construction and you're having to carry a bunch of shingles on a roof. Take a few shingles at a time up the ladder. You don't have to carry all the shingles up the ladder, right? Whatever analogy I need to tell you to visualize something like that. Break your workload into smaller chunks. It's easier to manage. Here's the thing here that a lot of people get wrong. Okay, if you don't get the score that you want on your first attempt, don't waste an opportunity to learn from that. Immediately go back in your car, go back to your home, start looking up the things that you suspect you got wrong so you don't miss them again. And then quickly as possible, go schedule the exam again within a couple of days while you still have all this knowledge, and then go pass the exam. When I first took the Veeam exam in 2017, I failed. I got like a 62 and I needed like a 70 to pass. Well, I knew the ones that I wasn't sure about. I went home, I studied for a couple of days. I went back a couple of days later, I passed with like an 87, right? Because I learned from my mistakes. It's crazy to make the same mistakes over and over again. And I work with some students sometimes, and over they keep missing the exam by just a couple of questions. And it's because they're just not learning from their mistakes. They're not taking advantage of that. So don't do that. All right. Time management here. Work the easy questions first. There's different levels of questions here. There's questions that are just like one sentence and maybe like one word answers. There's questions that may be a paragraph and they might have a one sentence answer. And then there's questions that are several paragraphs and maybe a couple of sentences for each answer. So I would do all the easy ones, the ones that only take you a few seconds to answer, get a bunch of those done. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, I've got 40 of these things done. I only got 20 of the, more difficult questions to answer. Or not maybe more difficult, they're just more time consuming, right? You're trying to uh, save a bunch of time on the easy ones so you have more time to spend on the ones that take longer. Yeah, mark the questions you're not sure about. You can come back to them. Don't dwell on the imperfect questions and answers. Humans write these things, and it's hard to know sometimes, like, what was Chris thinking when he wrote this test question? What scenario was he thinking in his head? And I'm not the only one that wrote the test questions. There's other people that did too. And I looked at their test question. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. What were you thinking when you wrote those questions and these answers? And they're like, well, I was thinking of this. I'm like, okay, we might want to write that a little more clearly. But as much as we try, the people that write the test questions, as much as we try, we're still not perfect. We're humans. So when you see a question on the exam and you're like, I hate this question, I hate everybody and the person that wrote this, and I'm going to say something about it, you don't have to get a perfect score. There's going to be some questions that you didn't study or you can't figure out what they're asking you. It's okay, right? We're going to move on. If we dwell on that, we're going to be focused on it, and then we're not going to have a clear head to answer the other ones. All right. So be expecting that you're going to get hit with a question that just doesn't seem fair. You're probably going to get a question on the exam about the Veeam SQL plugins or the Veeam Oracle plugins. And we don't even have that on the course. But you know that you might get a question on the Veeam plugins. So now you can study about that, by the way. But if you didn't study it, I'm going to show you maybe how you can guess. You can do an educated guess for some of the answers. You want to answer every question. I've had some students tell me I left some blank. You're going to get those wrong. You got to answer them. At least pick C. That's what my elementary instructor always told me. If you don't know, when in doubt, pick C. C is in cat. It's something. It's better than nothing. Review your questions. Make sure that you're comfortable as best you can with the answers you put down there. And again, you don't need a perfect score. You just need a passing score. So you're still called a doctor if you got a C average and you went through 8 years of medical school. You're still a doctor. You don't have to get straight A's. Right? I mean, I want the person that's got straight A's to work on me, but that's beside the point. All right. Make sure you read the questions very carefully. A lot of times I'll have students tell me that they were just racing. They wanted to like get this thing done quickly. How fast can I get this test done? I got it done in 30 minutes. Who cares? Right? I mean, that's not the competition. It's not who can get it done the fastest. Sometimes people will barely read the question because they think they know what the question is or they think they know what the answers are. I especially have trouble with the Veeam employees that I work with. We have some engineers and they do Veeam day in and day out. They have a lot of knowledge. They have so much knowledge, they got an ego. So they don't even want to read the question and answer carefully. They already just want to pick their own answer and they fail. And they wonder why they fail. I'm like, because you didn't write the question. So you need to read more carefully. Um, Sometimes when we're reading a question or looking at the answers, we just can't seem to find what we think is the correct answer. We want to go back to the question and look for more clues. Right now, I'll show you some examples of that. And I know we got a couple minutes left. We want to try to eliminate two wrong answers. When we worked with Alpine to come up with the test questions, they told us that there needs to be only one correct answer. There needs to be one answer that's kind of close to that. There needs to be two obvious wrong answers. That was the strategies that Alpine told us. So if you know anything about the question, you should be able to eliminate at least two wrong answers. Now you're just debating between the other two. Right? And when it comes to debating between the other two, we might have to go back to the question and look for more clues. Now, I say use the clues to pick the best answer. You might not agree with the question. You might not agree with the answers. You might think of a scenario that you've done at work or done for customers, and you're like, if I had this happen to me at work, I would answer it this way. But I don't see that answer right now in the exam. Sometimes we're given a certain scenario, and that's the constraints that we're under. You got to pick the best answer at that time. You might do something differently at work or with your customers. but what do you think the best answer is here right now under this scenario? That's all we got. We don't get to add anything to the test questions. You don't get to type in, I would answer it this way. You can leave some comments, if you wanted to. Um, but yeah, you don't get to change the test questions or answers on the exam. A lot of people mentally try to do that. The different types of questions, real simple questions, is like, what can you recall about a certain feature of Veeam? Level two question that may take you a little bit longer is, do you understand this certain scenario? And then how do you apply, the knowledge behind that? So, you need to restore data in a certain way. Well, you'd have to know about a certain Veeam feature and how it works to be able to answer that question properly. A level three question, a lot of times you're going to see some scenarios there. And I'll give you an example. Like a level one question, administrator of a VMware environment wants to do an application-aware backup of PostgreSQL database on a Linux VM. What did they do to accomplish this? And there's some answers behind that. Um, you know, Basically, we can turn on application-aware processing in the backup job. So you have a one sentence question here, basically, and you're going to have a real simple answer. Those type of questions, if you know anything about that particular Veeam feature, you should be able to answer that in under a minute. Level two question. Now we have two or three sentences, maybe a couple of paragraphs here. It's going to take us a minute probably to read this, and then a little bit more time to read the answers carefully. Level three question, even a little bit more time to answer. There might even be a screen capture of something, and you'll have to look at these things very closely. Right? The clues that you might look for too is like, why did they say 31 days? Why are they pointing out that it's January 20th today and we need to recover something from January 1st? And what does that have to do with 31 here or 14 there? There's a reason why somebody wrote the question with those exact numbers in there. They're trying to draw our attention a certain way. Go back to a question here. Why did they choose it to be a Postgres database and a Linux VM? Why would they ask the question that way? Why isn't it a Windows VM and a SQL database? Think about those things when you're analyzing those questions. I wish that I had, more time with you all, but anyway, when you go through these practice questions at your spare time, look up the answers. Right? And then if you have any questions, you could post those on the communities and we could try to answer those. But I think
Hey, Chris.
Shane's going to post those. Yeah,
Yeah, real quick. First of all, we obviously, as you know, we need to wrap up here pretty soon. But I
yeah.
do have a question Adam has that I think you may know the answer to. Are the questions weighted differently? In other words, by the level? Is a level three worth more points, say, than a level one? Or are is it, and I'm gonna add to his question, I guess, is there is there potentially more than one answer in a question where the actual right answer is you get so many points and then a potential right answer, those close answers that you stated earlier, you get maybe a partial pointage for that?
Yeah. When Alpine asked us to write the test questions, they said that it should only be one correct answer. So there may be one, like for example, this question here. To me, the correct answer is in version 12 of Veeam, I would just turn on application aware processing in the virtual machine backup job. Right? I don't have to install any Veeam agents. But how I would have answered this in version 11 is I would have to install the Veeam agent for Linux and the VM because we didn't do Postgres application aware processing in version 11. So if somebody answered it this way, could that work? Yes, but it's going to be a wrong answer because this is the best answer here. So when you're answering these questions, don't think about, well, I could get this to work. There's only one correct answer here in this. This one is, that's why I tell you to pick the best answer, right? There's multiple ways that you can get something to work with Veeam. That's the great thing about Veeam. But in this game that we're playing here, pick the better answer. You know, the other ones, they would be obviously wrong if we read through those.
Okay. And then specifically to Adam's question, like is a level 3 question worth more than a level, say, 1 or 2?
I would like to believe that, but Alpine never told us that level 3 questions are worth 5 points and level 1 questions are worth 1 point. They never told us that,
Fair
which
enough.
I guess it's a good thing because I'm a blabbermouth and I would give away all the secrets, but they didn't tell me. So I would think that the questions that take more time would be worth more, but I don't know that to be true. So I don't want to get that out in the public, like Chris said this. So what I believe and what's true are two different things usually. Yeah. What any other questions?
No, that was all that
All
I
right.
know of.
So I'm going to leave you all with this because I want to respect your time. Not only do you want to look up the answers in the user guide, try to find the answers there. Also, you may have to go into a lab environment. If you have your own lab environment, wonderful. If you don't, use the free hands-on labs that Shane and I were talking about and start to dig around. Find the answers from the Veeam console. The great thing about you doing that is you're going to find the correct answer yourself and you're going to learn a whole lot more. You're going to mentally get some pictures in your head so that no matter what they ask you on the exam, you've got those visuals that you can go by, the things that you remembered. Your muscles clicked on things, your eyes looked at things. And now, when you get a question, you have a better chance of passing it, not because you memorize things, but you looked it up and you practiced that. So that's how I exactly prepare for the exam. Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, everyone, that will conclude our webinar today. Just as Chris mentioned, just to respect everyone's time, if you have any feedback for us, go ahead and I believe I created a post advertising this webinar session in the VMCE Study Hall page on the Community Hub. Just go ahead and write a comment there and provide any feedback if you have any. And I believe that's all we have. Chris, do you have any final comments that you want to share?
I'm just posting a link to a Dropbox folder that has my presentation on it, and maybe there's another way that we can share that too. Um, but yeah, if anybody wants to grab that link from the chat window, you can. If you don't get it and you want it, you could reach out to us and we'll find a way to get you the PowerPoint slides there.
Great. Yes. And one final thing is we did record this session this time. We thought we did the first session, but we neglected to do so. So this will be posted if you have colleagues or friends that wanted to watch this but weren't able to get away to catch it. This will be posted later over the next day or few. So thank you all for joining, and you have a good weekend.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks, Shane, for this opportunity.
Great. Thank you guys.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye.